Hello, everybody. How's it going? Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me okay? Hello, hello. Anyone in the chat? Okay, we can hear. Cool. All right, I have a PC set up now, which is a little... Woo! Now is not the time to receive notifications. I just got this PC, so I'm still working out all of the, the bugs. So welcome everybody to the stream. We will start as more people kind of come in. How's everybody doing? Are we doing okay? What are things like in y'all's furry lives? Hello, Rion. Hello, Beagle Wrestler. Hello, Wolf Assassin. Ah! Are you a wolf who is an assassin, or do you assassinate wolves? That's the question. Hello, Jess. Hello, Duco. Thank you. Hello, Poppy, Jeremy, OPH kids, Fred Boy. Detective Jake says I'm lagging. I don't quite know how to fix that at this moment, but we'll see. But yeah, that's So the reason is I have a new setup and I'm still kind of working everything out. This week is like super busy for me. And then I'll make an announcement or something via YouTube post and tweet. But next week I probably won't upload any content, so no Monday, Wednesday, or Friday content. The reason being is that it's spring break and I'm going to see my family and friends in Oklahoma for the first time since 2019. Just so y'all know, I am fully vaccinated. I got my second dose of the vaccine like 3 weeks ago or something. So most of my family and friends back home are vaccinated now too. So we're taking kind of a calculated risk to see each other. I haven't seen anyone up there since 2019 at this point. So I'm really trying to get everything done this week so that I can have next week to get some quality time with them since it's been so long. Oh, Detective Jake, that's fantastic. Michigan Fur. Oklahoma is where I'm from originally, so very excited. And also, Detective Jake, I'm doing okay. I'm doing well. Busy, but that is, just the way things are. I'm going to open this door because I feel less trapped. So yeah, I changed the webcam settings so it looks like way different. It looks like really different. I'll have to adjust this at some point. And then I still need to get proper streaming software, so I'm not just using YouTube's little client. So we have about 20 people in here so far, according to my number. It's a little bit lower than usual, so we'll give it a couple more minutes. I wonder if it's because I started kind of late. Because I started a little bit after the time, like a couple minutes after. I don't know. New York City Fur, hello. Quality 20 frames per second. Yeah, I'll get that figured out. Don't worry. We'll just have to deal with it. We'll just have to deal for it for this stream. But I will try to get it fixed before the next one. Let's see. It's a wolf that's an assassin. Okay, that's cool. I was afraid you were a person who assassinated wolves, but a wolf who is an assassin, I can deal with that. I feel safe with that. So anyway, well, we'll give it a couple more minutes and then we can start with the material. Because this week's stream is a continuation of last week's stream. So this is a more sort of substantive, like more related to the kind of work that I'm doing sort of stream. So let's see. I wonder, can I change camera settings? Let's see. Nope, that is not the right. Yeah, this is why I need to start using actual software as opposed to just the YouTube stuff. We'll worry about it next time. All right. So cool. So I guess this is probably the number that it's going to be. I just got a lot of Okay. Thank you, Windows 10. for that update. Cool. All right. So I say let's go ahead and get started. All right. So we're going to start this the way that we started the last one too, which I'm going to ask y'all a question. And throughout this little talk, I'm going to ask y'all several questions in which I'm requesting that y'all respond in the live chat, right? So my question for y'all, in your own words, what is history? What is history? What is the field of history? What is a history? What does history do? In your opinion, what is history? And if you could write your answer down in the chat, that would be great. And then I'll read and kind of summarize what y'all's points are. So the question for people just showing up, the question is, what is history? In your own words, what is history? What is a history? What are histories? Right? Cool. All right. So some of the answers we've got. Rion says history is a lesson from the past. Profile says history is what happened in the past. Tracy says history from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia, trademark. Gage says events that have happened in the past that we learn from. Okay, it's a little bit of an addition there. Michael says information over a long period of time. Detective Jake says I've only been in the fandom for a little less than a year. I guess that's not the question. All right. It is Arvid says is something that is written in humanity, is something that tells everything. Fred says history is a documentation of past events to preserve them for the future. Yonder says history is what has happened in the past. Simple. Is it simple? That'll be something, the question. All right. Duco says, to me, history is like stories of events from the past, right? So yeah, a lot of y'all are saying similar things, right? So y'all are talking about history happened, right? Like history are something that's kind of in the distance, right? So whenever you talk about history, you're talking about events that happened in the past, right? Some people have also added, now the frame rate's bothering me. It wasn't bothering me. Now it's bothering me a little bit too. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to drink this IPA and pretend it's not happening. All right. Welcome, Soren. Everybody say hello to Soren and also say hello to the other mods. I really wish Windows would stop giving me updates. All right, everybody, welcome the mods. Say thank you to the mods. Thank you, mods, for helping me out with the stream. Thank you. So a lot of y'all are saying very similar things, right? History is about the past, right? And some of y'all are saying that by examining history, by learning about history, we know more about the present, right? So the purpose of this stream is to kind of build off last stream where we're talking about furry history, right? So this is history that's for the specific subculture of which most of my viewers are part of, right? All right. So what we're talking about is, of course, events that happened for furries in the past. But the reason we're talking about them is because what we learn about furries in the past is very interesting in its own way, right? Like it's really cool to learn about stuff that happened in the past. But there's elements of that continue to today, right? So there is relevance in learning about what happened that carry into today, right? So that is what we're embarking on today. All right. So to kind of recap what we went over last time, we went over like a lot of stuff, a lot of material. So I'm going to just kind of summarize in brief. But basically, when we're talking about sort of the furry past, there's like a lot of, it's hard to really choose like a single moment to where like this is where furries started, right? Because the thing is, like with furries, there wasn't like a group of people who like came together and they're like, okay, furries exist now. Furries start today, right? And the way that like you could point to like a Super Bowl from 5 years ago and be like, this Super Bowl happened this day, right? You can't really do that with furries because the way furries happen, like the way furries become, is a lot of individual people across the country all developed an interest in anthropomorphic animals and a specific kind of anthropomorphic animal at the same time, right? So if you listen to stories from a lot of these, older furries, sort of the original furries or like proto-furries, you could say, a lot of them admit that they developed an interest in art, anthropomorphic art, what we would call furry art, proto-furry art even, they developed this interest kind of privately, right? So they really liked cartoons, like, you know, they liked Robin Hood, they liked Bambi, right? They liked Saturday morning cartoons, they liked anime, Kimbo the Lion, right? And they liked it in a really private way, right? And then what happens? A lot of these people become artists and they start making their own anthropomorphic art, taking their own little spins and tweaking it in kind of their own way. So a lot of furries, proto-furries, you know, maybe before they're calling themselves that, they developed this interest just kind of all over, and we're talking about the United States here, so focusing on the United States. So across the United States, West Coast, East Coast, primarily, all at the same time. All right, so that's kind of where we left off. And then my big argument for this is that furries are a fandom, okay? So that is what we're going to talk about today, is like the main point, is that furries are a fandom, right? So we're talking about the history of a fandom and what that means. Because whenever you sort of, you know, because we say the furry fandom, we say it a lot, you know, maybe without even really considering it, right? Ash Coyote's wonderful documentary that I reference, a lot of my historical knowledge of furries comes from that documentary, as well as Joe Strike's Furry Nation, as well as just like Fred Patton's written stuff. You know, it's kind of all over the place. But, you know, Ash Coyote's documentary is called The Fandom. All right. So I think the way this is, I don't really have like prepared notes. So this is, you know, this is kind of going off structure in my head. That makes sense. All right. So the way we're gonna sort of frame this discussion is around like fandom as like a thing. Okay. So my question for y'all, the furry fandom, right? That's what people call it. So I'm gonna ask a two-part question, right? Two-part question for y'all to respond to in the chat. All right. Are y'all ready for this? All right, because this one's kind of tough. It seems easy at first, but then it gets kind of tough. All right, so the first question is, are furries a fandom? Yes or no? Yes or no, are furries a fandom? You could also say kind of, too. That's fine, too. And then the second question, if furries are a fandom, what are we fans of? All right, people are saying, yes, we are a fandom. Yes, yes, most... We got a well, sort of, yes, meh, yes. All right, yeah. So first question, are furries a fandom? Most of y'all are saying yes. All right, so then the second question, furries are a fandom, and fandoms are made of people who are fans of something, right? So Trekkies are fans of Star Trek, Bronies are fans of My Little Pony. What are furries fans of? In your own words, what are furries fans of? All right, fellow Pink Wolf says anthropomorphic animals, right? Arvid says we are fans of anthropomorphic art. OPH says we are fans of anthro-animals, but we're also a community, so focus on community. That's important. All right, Rion says fans of anthropomorphic animals. Duco says of anthropomorphic animals. All right, anthro-animals, anthro, right? So there's a theme here. All right, anthropomorphic animals. All right, so furries are fans of anthropomorphic animals. Tracy has an answer. Furries are a community because they aren't fans of the same medium. The furry fandom enjoys all different kinds of media that just happens to contain animals that resemble humans. That's interesting, right? So that's a really nuanced sort of take there. So furries are a community, emphasis on community, because they aren't fans of the same medium, right? So medium in this instance, you could say like fans of Redwall, like the Redwall fandom is about the Redwall book, right? I'm trying to think of other sort of single media fans. What's another good one? It's like Firefly, right? Like the Firefly fandom is fans of that TV show, right? And the TV show is the medium, the book is the medium, right? But Tracy is saying furries are fans of anthro art across media, right? So furries like Redwall, of course. Furries like Zootopia, that's a movie. Furries like Beastars, it's an anime, right? But also furries like, we're talking about furries like anthro art, And so art is like, it can be digital art, which is its own medium. It can be printed art. I'm like pointing to all the stuff in my room that y'all can't see. All of my furry art. You'll have to guess what's behind the monitor that y'all can't see. Furries are fans of, printed art, which is its own medium. Furries are fans of fursuits, so costumes. Costuming is its own medium too, right? So Tracy's saying the furries are fans of anthropomorphic art across media, right? And so my sort of question, all right, not question, so assertion, what I'm kind of arguing is like furries are fans of anthropomorphic art across media, but it's not random, right? Like furries are interested in particular genres, right? So furries aren't interested in all anthropomorphic animals, is kind of what I'm arguing. For example, right, furries really like B-stars, right? But furries don't, like we got B-stars, fan art, B-stars like profile photos. I was hoping someone would have a B-stars profile photo in the chat. We got B-stars profile photos, right? So whenever furries love anthromedia, they like go all the way, right? Fan art, shipping characters, fan fiction, all of that, right? Furries don't have that for like Paddington. Like Paddington, it's an anthropomorphic animal. Lots of anthro animals in that movie, but very, furries don't really like that movie in the way that they like B-stars, right? Of course, I'm a furry who likes Paddington, but I don't like it in the same way I like Zootopia, for instance. Furries don't like the Cats movie. That's anthropomorphic animals, right? Or kind of anthropomorphic animal something. Furries don't like Brother Bear. Furries like Brother Bear. Furries don't like Little Bear. Remember that? Cute little Nickelodeon kids show, right? Furries, there's like, so the point is that there's a lot of anthropomorphic art that furries don't like as much. Right, if I bring it up, you probably like it because like lots of people like it, but you don't like it in the same way you like, Zootopia, B-stars, Robin Hood, right? So my argument is that furries are fans of anthropomorphic art across media. That's true, but it's a specific kind of anthropomorphic art, right? It's not anthropomorphic art in general. Furries are attracted to art that looks a certain way. Zootopia looks a certain way. B-stars looks a certain way. The Lion King looks a certain way, right? Furries are interested in an anthropomorphic animal aesthetic, right? There's a particular aesthetic that furries are attracted to, that furries are really interested in, and that is different. That is different than other fandoms. It is fundamentally a different phenomenon, right? Furries are fans of this. They're fans of this aesthetic, right? And this aesthetic is so interesting that furries behave the way other fandoms do, right? Writing fan fiction about characters in this aesthetic, getting fan art in this aesthetic, going to conventions, cosplay, right? It's all because of this aesthetic interest, right? So that's sort of my big argument, is that furries, we are fans of anthropomorphic animals, but not really. We're fans of the anthropomorphic animal aesthetic, right? So to kind of reiterate a point that I made in the last stream, so this makes furries distinct among other people, because the fact of the matter is, if you think about it enough, everybody likes anthropomorphic animals. Like pretty much everybody does. It's like one of the few, like, I hazard to say universal because that's like kind of problematic, but that's it's like consistent across people, through space and time, right? People anthropomorphize animals all the time, right? Like most people, a lot of Americans watch Disney animated movies and they like it just fine, but they're not furries, right? So like your parents watching Zootopia, they like the movie, they're not furries, right? Plenty of people watched, Robin Hood in the 70s and liked it, they're not furries, right? Furries are a particular community who behave in a certain way, who are fans of this aesthetic, right? So furries do not exist before the 1970s, is kind of my argument here, right? A lot of people which I understand where they're coming from, but I don't think it's a historically accurate argument to make to say that ancient peoples were furries because they had some sort of really tight relationship with anthropomorphic animals, right? So making anthropomorphic art, right? Anthropomorphizing animals in religious beliefs, even though like that's kind of that's different. Even to say that is kind of different than what's actually going on, right? So for those people, ancient peoples are not furries, right? Contemporary people who engage with anthropomorphic animals may also not be furries, right? Like most Americans are not furries, right? if we're keeping it stateside, right? So that is an argument that is important because it's crucial in understanding furry history, right? Because if you kind of hold the belief that furries are, if you go with the argument that furries are fans of anthropomorphic animals, then fans, yeah, we can consider fans its own thing. But most people, like anthropomorphic animals, that's kind of the thing. So furries are fans of an anthropomorphic animal aesthetic, right? And so to kind of make the point more clear, I'm going to relate this to, I'm sure, y'all's experiences, right? Sort of the way that y'all move about like the internet or in real life. You know how you're on Twitter or, somewhere and you see some art and you're like, a furry drew that. Like you see some art and you're like, I bet that person's a furry, right? Or you have like friends who aren't furries yet, but the way they kind of act and behave and the sort of characters they take interest in, the avatars that they use, you're like, probably a furry, right? Or you watch a TV show and you're like, furries will love this, right? So like when Beastars came out, like furries are going to love this, right? Or Zootopia, like the Zootopia teaser trailer, right? Where Nick Wilde is like not wearing any clothes and he's like anthropomorphic, right? Everyone knew that furries, as soon as they saw the teaser trailer, knew that furries were going to like it, right? So the aesthetic that furries like, you might not be aware that you are a fan of it, but you sense it, right? It's a sensibility. It's an aesthetic sensibility, right? You're into it without really thinking about it, right? And you're a fan of it too, right? So fan in this instance, right? So calling furries fans, part of a fandom, fan refers to like the behavior, right? That's what sets furries apart, right? Normies, normies who like Disney animated films, they like anthropomorphic animals, and they might like the stuff that fits within that aesthetic, but they're not fans because they're not behaving the way furries do, right? The way furries behave with the anthropomorphic animal aesthetic distinguishes them, right? We do fanish, it's like an adjective, fanish behaviors, right? So writing fan fiction, dressing up in animal costumes, art, having personas, right? Like having an online avatar that's different than like your not furry self, right? All of that, that's fanish behavior that makes furries a fandom, right? So furries are fans. Furries are fans of an anthropomorphic animal aesthetic. So when we're talking about the history of furries, we have to locate that, right? Like we have to be like, when did people start liking the furry aesthetic, right? When did they start doing it and behaving in like, an identifiable way, right? And that's where you have to construct the history, right? So there's just like, okay, so like what, so this is like, trying to go way to put this. It's like, once you kind of accept that as the premise, then it's just like, whoa, right? Okay. And so y'all can of course disagree with me, right? I'm saying all of this is just, I'm consulting the evidence and this is my argument, right? You're completely free to say, Charlie, I disagree with you. I don't know where you're coming from, right? But that's my argument. And that's whenever I'm writing about furries, because I'm a researcher, whenever I'm writing about furries, I'm operating with that premise, right? So furries are fans of the aesthetic, right? The furry aesthetic, right? So my interest is this aesthetic. Where does it come from? Where does this aesthetic originate, right? Does it originate from somewhere, right? Who determines what the aesthetic is, right? Like, who gets to be like, that's the aesthetic, that's not the aesthetic? What are the economic conditions that led to the aesthetic, right? What does the aesthetic do? Like, how does it operate, right? So an aesthetic, and the way that I understand it, an aesthetic isn't just visual, right? So you could say my bedroom has, like, I don't know, what would you call this aesthetic? Please don't roast me. Please don't roast me in the comments. I don't know. My bedroom's a terrible example. But what I'm saying is that aesthetics aren't just visual phenomenon. Aesthetics are deeper than that, right? So if I say furries are fans of the furry aesthetic, that's more than just furries like furry art, right? If you like furry art and you're a furry, that's implying a lot more than just you look at art, right? If you are a furry, like, being a furry changes your life, like, for real. Like, it really, if you think about it, like, being a furry, like, going all into the fandom, it changes, like, who you hang out with, right? It changes how you spend your money. It changes, like, the way that you look at your phone screen and for how long. It changes who you, like, date and marry. Like, it changes, like, where you travel. In certain ways, it allows people exploration of their identity, right? Their gender, sexual orientation, right? Being a furry, like, can really alter your life, right? So whenever I'm talking about an aesthetic, I'm not talking about aesthetic as just, like, visuals, right? Like, being a fan of an aesthetic in the way furries are, like, uproots you, right? It really changes who you are as a person, right? So this is a serious topic, right? Like, this is something worthy of, treatment, of, like, really thinking about these things deeply. So I'm going to check the chat. I'm checking the chat to see if people are. Tracy, I think the first funny animal cartoon was Felix the Cat in 1914. Yeah, people cite Felix the Cat as an originator of the furry aesthetic. Cool. All right, so I will. Yes. So Tiff, Five Nights at Freddy. I have watched the documentary. I'm assuming you're talking about Ash Coyotes. Down the Rabbit Hole has an amazing, like, like, Down the Rabbit Hole's video on furries is really, really good. Because Down the Rabbit Hole uses old, like, audio recordings of Mark Molino, Rod O'Reilly at, like, conventions talking. So it's really interesting. It's just not edited in the way that Ash Coyotes is. Ash Coyotes editing makes really adds a lot to that documentary. But Tiff, I've watched the documentary, so a lot of the sort of historical facts that I bring up come from that. Right. So furries are fans, right? Furries are a fandom. They behave the way other fans do. Furries have an object of fanish interest, right? Furries are interested in the aesthetic, and because they are interested in that aesthetic, they behave in the way that other fandoms do, right? But furries are different than other fandoms because of what they're a fan of, right? Blah, blah, that's the argument, right? So if we say furries are a fandom in this construction, then we can locate origin points, right? Like, we can't really say furries started on this day at this time, right? So the question is, where did furries start? How did furries start? Right? So that is where we're going to go, but I need to drink some water. How have I been talking for 30 minutes? Oh my goodness. All right. So if you watch Ash Coyote's documentary, if you listen to Down the Rabbit Hole's stuff, if you read what Fred Patton has wrote, if you go to WikiFur, if you, like, consult online sources, a lot of the original furries realized they harbored an interest in the furry aesthetic. And I'm just going to call it the furry aesthetic because I think that's the kind of the easiest way to do it. They were interested in the furry aesthetic, right? They were interested in anthropomorphic animals in a way that was different than their friends and family. right? So they harbored this interest, right? They held this interest inside. They watched the movies, right? They drew the art, right? But then where the furry fandom begins, in my view, is it's a several part process. It all kind of happens at the same time. So this is in the 1970s. Last week we talked about the economic conditions, the political sort of transnational flows in which these original furries found themselves with, right? So just to recap, the 1970s was stagflation time, right? This is for the demographic of people we're talking about. This is a time of economic uncertainty and civil unrest, right? It's gay rights, animal rights, various protests, stagflation economy. So this is an era in which people are feeling really uncertain about what's going on in a way that they didn't in the decades prior, right? Because New Deal era to the 1970s is considered like the economy, like the American economy, gold standard American economy, what a lot of people want to return back to. So that's the kind of like fog that furries are like wandering around in, is like this uncertain economic time. Japan and like Europe are these huge manufacturing powers now, and that's a new thing, right? 'Cause America up to this point really dominated in the world stage in these industries, and now they're not, right? So these original furries are, they're interested in the furry aesthetic. They're making their own art. Now, where the fandom begins is when they start talking to each other, right? So Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly in Ash Coyote's documentary, right? Rod O'Reilly goes to, I forget which convention he goes to, but he goes to a convention in which Mark Merlino is displaying his famous skill tear art. And Rod O'Reilly is like, I love these mustelid characters. Mark Merlino describes what this character is and about this club, right? So Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly develop a connection, right? This is how the fandom begins, is when furries start talking to each other, right? Because if you're a furry, that figures, right? That places you in conversation with other people who share that interest with you, right? So Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly start talking. But before this, Mark Merlino and Fred Patton, Fred Patton is a very important figure for furries and also anime fandom. But they start the Cartoon Fantasy Organization. And at the Cartoon Fantasy Organization, they screen furry titles and like anime. So like underground anime, right? It's like Kimba, that kind of stuff, right? Not the stuff that is because Speed Racer is on American TVs. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the stop motion one, the famous one, that's actually Japanese. It's a Japanese production, but it's shown on American screens. A lot of Americans consider it an American classic, but it's actually not. It's a Japanese animated film. Right, but there's like a certain taste in anime that develops with Fred Patton, Mark Merlino, and their crew, right? Cartoon Fantasy Organization, right? So this is the other thing, right? So you have furries meeting each other one-on-one, right? And then you have the Cartoon Fantasy Organization. So these furries are proto-furries. You're not really calling themselves that yet, right? They are meeting to watch movies, right? That's what furries do now, right? Like we do that now. Right, go to your friend's house and watch BoJack Horseman, right? So furries are meeting in these sort of locations, right? But then what happens is at sci-fi conventions, Lost Con, right before furry conventions, at these bigger sci-fi conventions, there's furry room parties. We still do room parties, right? I hope y'all are noticing what I'm doing right now. Furries are hosting room parties at sci-fi conventions. Furries host room parties now, right? Furries are hosting room parties. So now, I mean, imagine being this person, and then imagine being like having this interest in furries in the 1970s, and all of a sudden, like you're finding all these people who are interested in the same stuff you are. It's kind of what happens now on the internet, right? you like those wolves from Zootopia a whole bunch, and then you get on Twitter and you That's my furry story, as I'm sure a lot of my subscribers know, because I've told it 1,000 times at this point. Right? So furries are meeting at room parties in big sci-fi conventions. This is one way in which the furry fandom starts, in my view. Right? So you can say the furry fandom starts in one sense because furries are meeting each other in real life, right? Furries are meeting each other one-on-one. Furries are hosting meetups, and furries are hosting room parties, right? And then, of course, in the 1980s, we get Conference Zero, right? Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly's the original furry convention, right? And that's a lot of people. You could maybe say that as just like this is the fandom like starting in earnest, right? So I think you can make that argument. I'm not going to, but you could. All right. So that, in my opinion, in my view, that's only one way in which the furry fandom starts, right? Now, what's also important about furries, in addition to their social interaction, furries have to make their own stuff, right? Furries have to make their own art. Furries have to make their own, stuff. It's kind of what I'm trying to say, right? So this is where we go with the Amateur Press Association, APAs, right? So Voodie, Raw Brazzle, right? So it's Amateur Press Association. The idea is that a closed group of artists all submit stuff to an editor, and then the editor puts all of the stuff, all the comics, all of the art that they do into a single like publication, and then sends it back to them, right? But this is insular, right? This isn't like a Marvel comic book where some artists for Marvel write and draw, and then they sell it to a mass audience, right? This is different. This is a bunch of, original furries, proto furries, whatever you want to call them, who are making art for each other, right? So this is another way that the fandom begins, is with furries making their own art, their own cultural productions, evaluating it with each other, putting it in print, right? Validating, in a sense, right? Or not validating, it's not the right word, but just like creating stuff, right, together, right? Furries do that now too, right? Furries share art on Twitter, right? Furries commission art from one another, right? So it's with these original publications that the furry fandom also begins. All right, so this is where things get kind of interesting. I'm out of water already. Wow. Thank you, Duco. I hope you feel better. Thanks for helping out. I really appreciate it. All right. So, all right. So we're going to have to come back to the aesthetic, right? So the first part that I kind of offered y'all was like, where does like the furry fandom begin, right? And so the furry fandom, in my view, begins in the 1970s, and this is where a lot of people locate it starting. It starts in the 1970s because furries who harbor an interest in the furry aesthetic start, one, socializing with one another, having conventions, hanging out for the first time, and then two, furries start making stuff, right? Furries start making art that they share with each other, and that they critique, right? That they interact with, they respond to, that they own, that you can purchase, right? So in my view, this is the way furries begin, right? And so you can if people do this, like I think Joe Strike does a similar thing. You can locate a moment in there, right? To be like, this is the first piece of furry art, right? Like this is the first person, right? This is the fursona. That's actually really interesting. We should talk about that at some point. Oh, we should do a fursona stream. That'd be really good. Just talk about like what the fursona is and what it does, but we'll focus on history for right now. Right. So in these processes, you can be like, this CFO, Cartoon Fantasy Organization, this meeting is where furries started, right? This is the first free art. You can do that. For me, that's not as interesting. It's not as interesting as when furries sort of come together as groups, right? Because it's only as a group that there is a fandom, right? When you have a group of fans, you have a fandom. All right. So now the question is the aesthetic, right? We keep talking about the furry aesthetic, right? So furries originate in the 70s, but is that where the aesthetic originates too? This is a tough question. This is a tough one to figure out. Just reading the comments. All right. So in my view, the aesthetic also has an origin, and the aesthetic doesn't exist because one person was like, oh, I'm gonna make this type of anthropomorphic animal art that only a select group of underground, fandom fanish people will enjoy, right? The aesthetic, in my view, is the product of a lot of different stuff that's happening at the same time. There's like a lot of stuff that's going around that makes the aesthetic exist. And so that's the next part of the stream that we'll talk about. All right, where does the furry aesthetic come from? Right? What are the parts, right? Like, what are the things that were set in motion that made the furry aesthetic exist, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. This is not related at all, but I'm trying to figure out, do I want to order wings tonight? Wings sound kind of good. I should do that. I should order those on the stream at some point. The aesthetic. So where to start with this one? So the aesthetic starts. So first of all, the aesthetic is not one thing. The aesthetic hybridizes, it remixes, it takes parts of stuff that already exists and it remakes it into something new, is the argument, right? So whenever a furry draws a persona, right? Whenever a furry artist draws a persona, you can tell that they have a style, right? This is very common Twitter memes, right? It's talking about like having different art styles, right? So furry art can have a certain style. It can be toony, right? Toony is a style that's very popular, right? Furry art can look more like anime, right? Furry art can be watercolor. It's most of Charlie's art is watercolor, right? Furry art has characteristics that you can identify outside of it just being furry, right? So that's what makes the furry aesthetic unique, is that the furry aesthetic, it's not just one thing. It's a mix of a bunch of stuff, right? It's just like I'm going to take some anime, I'm going to take some cartoons, I'm going to take some, funny animals. I'm just going to throw them in a blender, and then my pantomime, and then boom, you got this is the furry aesthetic, right? So that's what makes furries kind of different, is because the thing that furries are fans of is self-generated, right? It's self-created, right? Furries are fans of media that they make, right? Most of the furry art that you consume, like Charlie's thumbnail for this video, right? Most of the art that you consume is stuff that furries make themselves, right? That's different than other fandoms, right? Most other fandoms, right? Trekkies are fans of Star Trek. That's a corporate media production, right? There's a big corporation behind making it, right? Bronies like My Little Pony, right? My Little Pony is a TV show, right? In which the media that they consume is created by people who are not them, right? Furries are different, right? The media that we like, we make ourselves for the most part, right? Like we like Zootopia, we like Beastars, whatever. But the personas we have, furries make those, right? A lot of the furry comics that we like, those characters are wholly original in styles that are unique, right? So furries are fans of a furry aesthetic that they make themselves, right? So in the 1970s, if we want to locate the aesthetic, we have to figure out where these parts are coming from so that furry starts making them themselves, right? Whenever Mark Marlino makes a skill tear, mustelid with antennas, where is the inspiration coming from, right? Who is making this aesthetic? Where does the aesthetic come from? And so that is kind of the interesting sort of thing that's going on, in my view. So the furry aesthetic, the components of it originate from several different sources, right? So number one, funny animals, right? And so this is where like a lot of, like in Ash Coyote, they talk about funny animals a lot. Trying to think if they talk about in the Down the Rabbit Hole, very much, but funny animals, right? What are funny animals? Funny animals are animals that are in, newspaper comics, right? So like the animals, they're funny because they're in the funnies, right? They're not funny themselves, but they are in the funnies, right? So funny animals, right? So a lot of, especially artists for Voodoo and Rawbrazzle, locate these animals from the funnies as like use the proto furries, with the idea being that like whenever they were making their own comics, they were taking the funny animals and they were just focusing on them, right? Because like funny animals in the funnies, are side characters, right? They're periphery, right? Whereas in the comics that people are making in Voodoo, that these original furries are making in Voodoo and elsewhere, the funny animals are at the center, right? These funny animals get their own lives, their own narratives. They fall in love. They have senses of humor, right? So Omaha the Cat Dancer, right, is a location, or is one that's located as like an original sort of one of these, right? So that is one origin of the furry aesthetic, in my view. I mean, in a lot of people's views, not just mine, is with the animals and the funnies, right? But the thing is, it's not just that, right? If it was just that, then Voodoo and these other publications and these original furries, their art would effectively just be fan fiction, right? It would just be fan fiction of stuff that already exists. I think some people make that argument, though, that the original furry fandom were fans of funny animal comics. You could call that the original furry fandom. I don't necessarily see it that way. So we'll just keep going with that. The funny animals in the comics, this is one element, right? So we have a blender. We're going to go with the blender. The blender example, because that's the one that I start off. So we got a blender, and we're going to make a smoothie, right? And the smoothie that we pour out, that's the furry aesthetic, right? And so this aesthetic gets created in the 1970s, right? So one ingredient that we're gonna put in there is the animals from the funnies, right? So newspaper comics, that is one thing that's going in. All right. So what else is going on, right? It's not that. So I think the next thing to turn to would be American cartoons, right? So this is cartoons like that are on TV and they're in the movies, right? American producers, American studios are making these cartoons. Robin Hood is a go-to example. Bambi, Felix the Cat, right? Various levels of mainstream or underground, right? So American cartoons, I think, is somewhat obvious, right? So we can just, I feel like it's kind of easy to point to, so I'll just, okay, that goes in the blender too. All right, and now there's one other element that's very important, and this is Japanese cultural imports, right? Anime. Right, and the specific anime that furries are watching in this kind of fandom underground, right? And so whenever I'm talking about that sort of a fandom underground, I'm talking about this sort of new-ish cultural social form that's happening, kind of starting in the late 60s, early 70s. That a lot of people attribute to Trekkies. Star Trek is kind of starting, right? So it's these people who like comic book shops and conventions and, writing fan fiction. Like this is the kind of stuff when I'm talking about when I say like fandom underground, right? So anime just comes in, in full force into this underground, right? And so a lot of this early anime, like Kimba and other sort of animal characters that come out of these sort of cultural imports, we get to add that into the blender too. Right, so you just add into the blender all of these various pieces of art that exist, right? These are all elements that exist from corporate media productions. Furries have taken all of them, put them in the blender, and then just turn it on, and then voila, it's pouring out the smoothie. That is the furry aesthetic, right? That's how it comes to exist, right? So what furries are doing is they're taking elements of anthropomorphic art that they like, right? This isn't random. Right, the anthropomorphic art that they find really interesting, really attractive, right, that they think is cool, it just looks cool. They're taking their favorite parts, right, their favorite parts of all of this art, and they're just like making it into something new. That's how furries are different than other fandoms and other communities, really. and that furries are taking the stuff that they like that exists in the mainstream or the underground, just taking the bits of it and then just like remaking it, reconfiguring it into the furry aesthetic, right? And so the furry aesthetic comes to exist in the 1970s because it's at this particular moment in time that all of these media are available, right? It's at this time that anime has taken hold, that there is print, you're able to print stuff in the way that they're able to print stuff. Certain movies are coming out at the same time. That is why the furry aesthetic comes to exist, is because of the particular social and economic conditions at the time, right? U.S. and Japanese relations, right? That the relationship that exists in the 1970s has to exist for the furry aesthetic to exist, right? The American cartoon, I don't know if industry is the right word, but like American cartoons as like a cultural feature of U.S. culture has to exist in order for the furry aesthetic to emerge, right? And then, of course, Saturday morning cartoons, is that the way to say it? Newspaper comics, those have to exist in the way that they do, right? So this is another reason why the furry fandom exists in the 1970s, because in the 1970s, this is the precise historic moment at which all of these things are existing at the same time. As well, the furry fandom comes to exist from that aesthetic because the behaviors that furries do today, the stuff that we do today, they started doing then. Right? So the furries in the 1970s are doing the same stuff that we do today. We're doing it in different ways on different platforms, but the core components of what furries do start in the 1970s. Furries draw anthropomorphic animal characters in the furry aesthetic, right? That's like the main thing. We take the anthropomorphic animal, the furry aesthetic, we take it and we just do what we want to do with it, right? That starts in the 1970s, right? But other behaviors start in the 1970s, right? Going to conventions and hosting room parties. We do that now. We started doing it in the 1970s, right? Furries forge intimate, personal relationships, right? Lifelong friendships, romantic relationships. That stuff we do now with other furries, we started doing in the 1970s, right? Forging those relationships with someone who shares this really weird niche interest, right? We started doing that in the 1970s, right? Making comics, right? Making comics with funny animals where the funny animals take center stage. They have complex lives. They experience moral dilemmas. They have sex. All of that stuff, that kind of stuff starts in the 1970s, right? So that is like the furry history, right? To understand where furries come from, you have to understand where the aesthetic comes from and where the behavior begins, right? Furries behave like a fandom. Furries are a fandom. Most of the people in the chat agreed. Furries are a fandom. We are fans of the furry aesthetic. Furries start operating the way a fandom does in the 1970s, and the aesthetic that furries love also starts to exist in the 1970s, right? So to locate the furry fandom history, we have to dial it back to the precise time when all of this happens, right? And that's the furry history. Now, knowing that this is the history, right? These are all the components that come together. This is the way furries do stuff and the way furries continue to do stuff. It raises some interesting questions, right? So for instance, furries are different among most people in that we don't just watch. Oh, hope I didn't unplug that. We don't just like watch TV, right? We don't just watch movies, right? We go to the next level, right? We go and look at fan art. We go and draw our own fan art, right? We do it in ways that are personally meaningful, right? You could say that we queer media. Queer is like a verb, right? So like we take the wolves from Zootopia and make them into gay partners, right? We take these elements of corporate media and we turn them into new forms. We turn them into personas where we can like experiment with our gender, with our sexual orientation, with the way our body looks, with our personality traits, right? We take all of this stuff that is just corporate, just mass produced stuff, right? We take this mass produced stuff and we rearrange it and make it into these new personally meaningful and like life altering facets of who we are, right? So what furries are doing, there's like so much theoretical language that I'm dodging right now to say this. What furries are doing is we're taking like mass media, these huge systems in which we don't really have a choice. Like we don't really have a choice in what Disney makes, right? We don't have a choice in what like the United States chooses to import from other countries. We don't have a choice in what like Netflix chooses to put on their platform, right? So there's just all of these elements of our lives that we don't have a choice over, but we take the parts that we can have, or even the parts that we can't really have, and then we remake it into something that we can, right? So we're effectively taking control over stuff we don't have control over, right? And we turn it into these things that change us, right? That give us new friendships, give us romance, right? Helps us discover who we are. And that, in my opinion, is what makes furries really special, right? In the way that I should be saying it to an academic audience, right? Furries challenge traditional notions of agency within capitalism. It's kind of the situation. So that is my history of furries, right? Well, the next step would be, which is beyond the scope of this stream. The next step is to show how furries go from existing in real life, right? Because furries in the 1970s, they were furries in real life, and that's kind of it. To how furries become an online fandom in the 90s, right? So in the 1970s, you also get ARPANET. Does anyone know what ARPANET is? So the ARPANET is like the original, it's not the way to put it. It's like the precursor to the internet. So the internet, could do internet history. That'd be interesting. So the reason the internet exists is because the government gave a lot of money to the original computer scientists, and was just like, okay, we're in the Cold War, like make something. And so you get the ARPANET that starts connecting university computers. And then eventually that turns into the internet. And once furries at universities start getting access to that, and then once computers start existing in people's homes, then you get the rise of furry mucks and muds, right? So these are role-playing games where you can be your persona and like chat with other people, right? And so with these original furry mucks and muds, this is where the fandom starts to transition into the internet, and that's where we get really the furry fandom as we consider it today. But the whole point is that the furry fandom, the seeds are planted in the 1970s, right? That's where you can really locate the furry fandom as its own unique behaving sort of stuff. And it's really cool. There we go. That's the talk. Yeah, we have 30 minutes left of the stream. Hooray. So I remember Muds feeling old. That's funny. So yeah, that is my furry history, right? This is my history, right? Lots of histories get written. There is not one history, right? There's things that happen, and then people make a history about those things that happen. So this is my furry history. This is my contribution to furry knowledge, is that this is the way furries happened. This is the way furries continue to happen. You see it. Looks left, you see a desk and chair. Yeah, so these original role-playing sort of, like people will call it RP chat now. Yeah, that originates with those, yeah. I should write a book. Thank you. That's what the dissertation will be, hopefully. Something that turns into a book. So my research more broadly, I mean, the furry stuff is interesting because everybody here is furries. But the other parts of my research is not just furries. It's about other communities that form under like similar circumstances. There's lots of communities that form the way furries do. But furries are the example for this stream. So yeah, that is essentially the scene. Is it okay if I grab another beer? I want to grab another beer for the last 30 minutes of this talk. And then we can transition to hangout times if y'all want to do hangout times. But I have to get permission to get a beer before we can do hangout times. Does somebody give me permission to grab a beer? Please, can I get a beer, please? OPH says no. Chargrath says yes. Thank you. I appreciate it. One sec. Hello. Water. Okay, I'll get some water. Let me fill this water bottle up. 1 second. I do not want to drink unicorn blood. No, thank you. Beer does care for my body. It's true. Yes, you should eat a Pop-Tart. old meme. We haven't had Pop-Tart chat. Okay, so now it's just chill hangout streams. I feel like I'm talking super loud. So now hangout. Any questions for me? I can answer questions. We will also do the regular boops and whatnot at the end. Yeah, bike racer. Almost said racer. Yeah, I think that would be pretty fun for streams, is to talk about just like the really wild stuff. So the chlorine attack. That's a really interesting furry cultural thing. I don't really want to say anything about it until I do some more research, but it's interesting. Yeah. Does Yoshi count as a furry? Well, I think your profile photo is Yoshi, so yes. Yeah. I don't know if anything sort of counts or doesn't count as a furry. I think it's just like what furries do with it. You could, in theory, you can make anything a furry. People make inanimate objects furries. Brave Little Toaster is a furry, if you think hard enough about it. All right, Chargrath asks, Charlie, what music do you listen to, and do you collect any music? So I don't collect any music. It looks like a fun hobby, but I don't have records or anything. So I just stream and listen to stuff on YouTube. I legitimately listen to most sort of popular genres. I don't want to say I listen to every genre because somebody will name something super niche that I don't know. So right now I've been listening to a lot of Midwest emo. I don't know why. I've just been on a real Midwest emo kick. Just a lot of the newer bands that are into that. Yeah. Yeah, OPH, I'm not sure if I can offer any good advice on that because I'm really far removed from, I'm assuming you're in high school or middle school or something. So I'm very far removed from that. So I don't know the best way to find a furry. And then I also didn't know I was a furry until I was in college. So I'm not quite sure the best way. Legoshi, what is my favorite country? America. The United States. It's the only one I know. Oh, it's okay to bring it up, Bike. I don't want to talk about it unless I have, right. I feel comfortable talking about furry history, what I talked about, because I've done a lot of research. I've done a ton of research, but I don't know those events that you bring up. I don't know enough about, I don't have enough evidence to really make any claims the way I would want to on the stream. Sharkrath, I like your sense of humor. That's so funny. Yeah, Thomas. Yeah, the internet. I mean, the internet started. I wasn't born until after the internet existed. So I'm I'm a Gen Z millennial cusper, technically. Mete, interesting. Yeah, a huge shift in the way news outlets talk about furries before and after the chlorine tax. That's really interesting. Yeah, I would have to like look at a lot of media representations, um, or media talks about that, which is interesting. Yeah, definitely news coverage of furries has gotten a lot kinder in the past, like I don't know, 6 years, 6 or 7 years. There's that CNN very kind documentary on furries. But I don't know. There's still always like really sensationalist, just like takes on furries too. I mean, it's so astounding that like so many like news outlets will report on furries without doing that much like work into it because there's like a lot of furries self-insert who know a lot about furries. You know, there's like a lot of people who know a lot. Um, Thunderwolf asks, of all the Star Wars films, which is your favorite? My favorite is what is the title? What is the title of the Star Wars movie? Oh goodness. Um, what is the movie that's not really part of the? I'm gonna do a quick Google search. StarWars.com. Rogue One. There we go. Rogue One is my favorite Star Wars movie. It's my favorite Star Wars movie because it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with the original series, and I like that a lot. And I love the ending. I love the ending to that film a lot. Yeah, Shargrath, that's great. Hello, Skullhound. I'm doing well. I'm not as tipsy as I want to be. Tomorrow's my last day of work for the week, and I just really want it to be over with. I'm really ready for break. All right, what was the last book you read that one wasn't on a syllabus? And two cost $375 used at the bookstore. I don't know. I don't even know the last book I read that wasn't on the syllabus. And I'm extrapolating that wasn't on the syllabus means related to my research. The issue with being in grad school is that now like all of my writing or all of my reading, like I can't pleasure read anymore. Like if I read something, it has to be like worth my time, in regards to research. So yeah. Yes, Lucas. Absolutely. Would something like goth also count as an aesthetic fandom, just like furry? Yes, 100% goths. Yes, there's a lot of examples. But goths are for sure one. I'm glad Thunderwolf likes Rogue One as well. Zeal, it's okay. We're just hanging out for the next however many minutes, 20 minutes or so. Rogue One was kind of sad. Yeah, I think that's why I liked it. At the ending, they just kind of accepted it, Why are, why are y'all roasting me? I swear, a lot of y'all joined this chat just to mercilessly roast me. People were talking about my FPS on my brand new webcam setup. I'm a humanities person, so y'all should be proud that I even got a PC ready. Support me. Yeah, biker. Yeah, furries are a net positive for sure. Not just for furries, but for the communities that they touch. I haven't played anything on my Switch in a while. I have a PC now, so now I'm playing Age of Empires 2 again, like I was always destined to play. So what am I trying to say? What was I trying to say? I forgot. I unplugged my. Oh, I'm playing Age of Empires 2 a lot. That's my like main video game. Isn't that funny? So just playing all Age of Empires 2. I guess it's also kind of problematic too. It's like as a history person, it's kind of a problematic game to play. Yeah, it's also part of my childhood too, which is why I think that's why I enjoy playing it now. And I don't know, I like the HD treatment it's gotten. It's aesthetically very pleasing. What is my favorite game genre? I don't know. I don't play enough video games, I think, to really have an opinion. Train Simulator. I dropped the mic. Okay. Drop the mic. Oh no, did I unplug it again? Wait, is it not picking me up? Hello? Can y'all hear me? This is so embarrassing. I really need to get... I'm fine. Okay. Am I being bullied again? I'm so gullible. I can't handle it. Yay, people can hear me. This is successful. Okay. No, ruled true classic of train games. How much did my suit cost? I don't remember. It wasn't cheap. I can't give you the exact cost, but it wasn't cheap. I mean, thousands of dollars. Thank you, Soren. I appreciate you, Soren. Okay. We might have to cut the stream a little bit short. So is it okay if we do boops and then exit? Is that cool? You want to do boops? Boops time? Boops? Can you do some boops? Woo! Okay, let me grab my fursuit. Aha. It's gonna be the camera's a lot higher. Well, the camera's a lot better for the like angle is a lot better for this than on my laptop. Oh, having a PC is so nice. I can't believe I took this long to get a PC. I should have gotten a PC a lot sooner. Alrighty, boops time. All right. So the way this works for people who are new, I'm gonna count down from 3, and then we're gonna boop. All right, you ready? 3, 2, 1. Boop. Boop. It is fun, right? All right. So let's do another one. All right, you ready? 3, 2, 1. Boop. All right, let's do one more. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Boop. Yay. Okay. One more. Let's do one more. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Boop. Hooray. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning into my stream and listening to my history of furries. We'll do more of these kind of streams where we'll talk more sort of deeply about just furries, just about our community. That's kind of one of the goals of the channel, is just for us to learn more about ourselves. So we'll do more of these once again, and I'll make an announcement on YouTube community thing as well as Twitter. But next week, so I'll do a video Friday, but then next Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, no content because I'm going to be with my family and stuff. So anyway, thanks everybody for tuning into the stream. I'll see y'all later. Goodbye. Bye, everybody.